Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into a strict investigative look at the truly horrifying global growth of cyberscam networks. We're going to examine how these massive, illicit organizations operate across continents, and we'll use a recent and frankly massive raid in Uganda as our microcosm to really unpack a disturbing geopolitical pattern. So, we're talking global crime, human trafficking, and crucially, how accountability so often just vanishes into the shadows. Let's get right into it. Let's start with the hook. Just picture this. Authorities storm a hidden compound. They arrest over 200 people in one massive sweep. They load them into police trucks, show this huge bust off to the world, and it looks like a massive, clear-cut win for law enforcement, right? Well, then something genuinely shocking happens. They disappeared, just completely vanished from the justice system. I mean, there were absolutely no trials, no convictions, and honestly, no answers whatsoever. What kicked off as a highly publicized bust morphed overnight into a huge geopolitical mystery. Because, guys, making 200 people disappear like that, it's not some administrative glitch. It's literally a built-in feature of how these global networks protect themselves. Which brings us to Section 1, the Kampala vanishing. Let's look at exactly what authorities actually found hiding in plain sight behind those locked gates. The timeline of this case is wild because it captures exactly how fast this story blew up, right before authorities abruptly shut the whole thing down. In April 2026, police hit this compound in Kampala. Days later, it's totally clear what they're dealing with. Over 200 foreign nationals operating inside a heavily fortified complex. But then, check out that final point. Just weeks later, those suspects are quietly deported. The investigation is just stopped, completely shut down. Now, the assets they seized proved pretty fast that this wasn't just some overcrowded residence. Authorities found endless rows of computers, literally hundreds and hundreds of mobile phones, and these highly structured workstations. This was an industrial-scale system. It was designed to run around the clock with factory-like precision. So, a simple call center or a global cyber scam operation? At first glance, you might think, okay, an unregulated call center. But investigators immediately suspected they were looking at something way darker. They knew this was likely a localized node of a terrifyingly familiar global network. Because, well, we've seen this exact footprint before, operating far beyond Uganda's borders. That brings us to Section 2, inside the scam compound. To really understand what likely went down in Kampala, we have to look at the grim reality of how these exact types of complexes operate over in Southeast Asia. It's a highly calculated pipeline of human trafficking, and it usually plays out in 5 distinct steps. First, victims are recruited with promises of really high-paying, legitimate IT jobs. Then the network actually processes their flights and travel docs, which shows you just how incredibly capable their logistics are. But step 3, that's where the trap snaps shut. Passports are confiscated the absolute second they arrive. From there, movement becomes strictly restricted, and these people are totally stripped of their freedom, forced to spend their days building trust with strangers online just to steal their money. And behind those screens, this is the brutal reality. Punishments, physical abuse, electric shocks, and detention. In notorious compounds in places like Cambodia and Myanmar, survivors have detailed a system built entirely on violent control to hate quotas. Now, while we are still waiting for public confirmation of this specific level of extreme abuse in Kampala, the structural setup, the isolation, the foreign workforce, the locked gates, mirrors those violent compounds perfectly. It's a system literally designed for absolute obedience. All right, Section 3, deportation over accountability. This is the most baffling part of the entire Kampala raid and a really vital piece of our investigation today. Quiet, controlled, final. Instead of detailed public hearings where we could actually learn the truth, the suspects were rapidly shuffled through immigration and sent back to their home countries in total silence. Just as fast as the massive compound was exposed, the entire story began to systematically fade from the public eye. Here's the crucial thing. When authorities choose prosecution, they expose the global networks. We get to see the leadership hierarchies, we trace the illicit money flows. But when they choose deportation, the story simply ends at the surface level. By choosing speed and administrative convenience over a thorough investigation, authorities essentially permanently close the door on true accountability. Which leads right into Section 4, the global pattern. Let's see how this specific incident in Uganda isn't isolated, but actually builds into a much larger playbook. The geopolitical pattern here forms what we can call the Southeast Asian playbook. It's undeniable. In Cambodia, authorities uncover large-scale scam compounds. But when raids happen, the operators simply relocate across borders. In Myanmar, entire regions have transformed into heavily guarded cyber hubs. The global reality is that these operations are almost never actually destroyed by a single raid. They just use their massive wealth to adapt, shift, and expand. You squeeze them in one country, they pop up in another. And that forces us to ask a really chilling question. If an operation requiring massive infrastructure and over 200 smuggled foreign workers could remain totally hidden in Uganda's capital, how many other silent compounds are currently active around the world? It is highly, highly likely that Kampala was just the tip of the iceberg, the one visible node of a massive subterranean network. Finally, Section 5, the unanswered questions. Because those deportations happened so quickly, we are left with a massive intelligence void. First up, who recruited them? We have absolutely no idea who the boots on the ground were. Who were the agents in these victims' home countries posting the fake job ads and luring them into the pipeline in the first place? That local recruitment infrastructure remains completely intact. Second, who funded the operation? Setting up a secure, heavily fortified compound with hundreds of computers requires serious upfront capital. But because the investigation was halted, the financial backers, the true architects of this misery, remain completely anonymous, and their bank accounts are completely untouched. And crucially, who was in charge on the inside, and where are they now? Out of those 200 deported people, there was definitely a complex hierarchy. You had innocent trafficked victims alongside ruthless mid-level operators enforcing the punishments. But because they were all swept onto planes together, those critical legal distinctions have been erased forever. And that leads us to this grim conclusion. Without trials, the truth disappears. It's the core tragedy of the Kampala vanishing. Rapid deportation fundamentally guarantees that the masterminds escape justice. Without a full investigation, we are quite literally just fighting shadows. The haunting reality is that the network behind this compound isn't bound to a single physical location. It moves, it adapts, it hides, and it waits. The Kampala compound might be empty now, but the network itself survives. With its leadership unexposed and funding secured, it is almost certainly rebuilding right now, perhaps in a completely different hemisphere. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. As long as our global justice systems choose rapid deportations over deep, complex investigations, accountability is going to be avoided. And the next time this exact network surfaces, it might not be behind physical walls that police can raid. It may be entirely decentralized, making us all potential targets. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep your eyes open and never stop questioning what goes on in the shadows.